Hello and welcome back to Round the Table, slow TV radio from the meeting point, broadcasting not only to Bilbao but throughout the world. Welcome back to Round the Table, episode 73, and this week our topic of conversation has been rage, anger and fury. And in this episode we have some phrasal verbs, we have interesting phrases from this week's conversation, and we have a quote of the week, as well as a bit of pronunciation, I think. Let's begin with quote of the week. And this week's quote comes from Nelson Mandela. Of course, a man famous for containing his anger. And his phrase is, "Do not raise your voice. Improve your argument." I think that quotation contains a lesson that might be very important to a great many people in the media, especially politicians. If politicians could improve their argument, maybe we might see some progress in the world. It's something sadly lacking at the moment, is a decent argument. People much prefer to just shout above their opponents and think they're winning an argument, which they're not. So now let's look at some of the phrases from this week's conversations. We have to get it out of your system. To get it out of your system is when you've got pent-up anger. Pent up means contained inside you, that's ready to explode. So to get it out of your system is to release your anger or to release your stress. And it's very similar to get it off your chest. But get it off your chest is usually when you have a problem that you need to share with someone. So instead of keeping your problem to yourself, it's better to tell a friend or a family member your problems, and that is to get it off your chest, something that needs to be said. So get it out of your system is much more explosive. Sometimes you might need to shout at someone, you might need to smash some plates, you might need to go to the gymnasium and do some boxing, or maybe just go running in the park might get it out of your system. And a related one to that is to let off steam. Imagine this comes from steam engines, I think, old-fashioned trains. When they have too much pressure in the boiler, you have to let off steam. And also when you're cooking your beans or your chickpeas in the pressure cooker, the steam comes out of that little hole, and before you take the lid off, when they're finished, you need to let off steam, don't you? To release the pressure. So that's why you let off steam when you're angry. One of the conversations we were having this week at the meeting point was a discussion on how anger could be a force for creativity. Sometimes angry young people create better music, or they can express themselves through art and things like that. So sometimes if anger can be harnessed, it can be used. It could be channeled, we might say. You can channel your energy to direct your energy in a certain way. So you could harness your energy or channel your energy as a force for creativity. And then we were exploring the opposite idea of saying, if people have creativity, if they can write music or paint, then it's a way of releasing the anger. So if people were more creative, there would be less violence, maybe. So I was just discussing this with my chat GPT. As you know, I often have conversations with the computer. And I said, give me a short poem beginning, "I'd like to punch you in the face," and finishing with, "and I wrote this poem instead." So here is a poem that next time you feel the need to punch somebody, all you have to do is recite this poem to them.
I'd like to punch you in the face, a thought that surged with sudden pace. But bruises never heal what's said, when words can quench the fire instead. So I breathed once more to keep my head, and I wrote this poem instead.
And now it's time for your favourite part of the podcast. It's time to introduce our celebrity guest speaker.
Hello, Richard. Yes, that's right. I just got off the plane from California this morning. You know that the members of the meeting point are as important to me as they are to you. So I flew in specially to deliver this week's monologue on the topic of rage. So, shall I begin?
Yes, please do.
Rage has always been a part of human emotion, but many people believe that it has become more visible, more common, and more intense in today's world. We see expressions of anger everywhere, in traffic, in shops, online, in politics, and even at home. This raises an important question. Are we angrier now than before, or do we simply have more opportunities to express our anger? One reason for the rise of rage is the pace of modern life. People are often stressed, tired, and overwhelmed. When you feel you have no time, no space, and no control, even small problems can feel much bigger than they are. Long working hours, financial pressure, and constant multitasking create an environment where frustration builds quickly. Another factor is technology, especially social media. Online platforms allow people to react instantly without thinking, and often without consequences. A single comment, photo, or news headline can provoke anger in seconds. In the past, people might have calmed down before speaking. Now, we can express rage publicly with one click. The result is a culture where anger spreads faster and becomes more visible. There is also the feeling that society is becoming more divided. When people believe that others threaten their values or identity, they react emotionally instead of rationally. This can make disagreements feel personal, increasing the intensity of anger. At the same time, many people lack healthy ways to manage stress. Exercise, sleep, and meaningful social connection all reduce anger, but modern life often leaves little room for them. Rage itself is not new, but the combination of stress, technology, and social tension means we now have more triggers and fewer moments of calm. Understanding this helps us recognize why anger feels so present today, and why learning to handle it is more important than ever.
Okay, so let's have a look at some of the phrasal verbs that came up in this week's conversations. Of course, we've already had a look at let off steam. Let off is a phrasal verb. In your book, you also had storm off, I think it was. There is also to storm in, to storm out of a room, usually. Somebody stormed into the room. It's a way of saying they came into the room, so we can use storm as a verb to walk, but only as a phrasal verb. So you can storm in, you can storm out, or you can storm off. So it's a way of going or coming in a very angry manner. So if I say someone stormed into the room, we know that they're very angry. They've got that way of coming in. You could also say somebody burst into the room. There's another phrasal verb you can use in the same context. Freak out is another phrasal verb. When somebody goes crazy, they freak out. You might have seen that if you were a hippie in the 60s. People were always freaking out in the 60s. And flip out as well is another one, which means to go crazy. Again, you might have seen that phrasal verb somewhere in the past. So freak out and flip out are very similar. Lash out is when you either attack somebody, you try to punch somebody, or you can do it verbally. If you just shout at someone very suddenly, you might lash out at them. You might need the at with that. And finally, in the phrasal verbs, we won't do too many because there are many, many phrasal verbs I could use in this context. I put wind up. Wind up, really there's two phrasal verbs to wind up. One is when you're having a joke with someone. It's a bit like pulling someone's leg. You can say something that's not true and then say, I'm only winding you up. It means I'm only joking. But there's another wind up, which is to make people angry. Now this word wind looks like wind, but it's not wind, it's wind, as in what you do with an alarm clock. Remember alarm clocks in the olden days when they had a key in the back and you would make that noise. I'll try and find a sound effect for that. Anyway, you would wind up the clock because that's how clocks used to work. If you're a young person, you might not know what I'm talking about, but as most of our meeting point people are senior in years, you should know what the old-fashioned clocks were like. So that is what you do with clocks. So you wind them up. And so that's sort of increasing the tension, you see. That's why you get wound up in an angry situation when you're stuck in the traffic or you're stuck on hold trying to talk to someone on the telephone and you're given an answer machine. These things wind you up. That is also why we have that verb to unwind. When you go on holiday and you relax, we often use the word unwind. So it's the opposite of getting wound up with your tensions of everyday life. So wind up is a very good phrasal verb, but it's not good to get wound up. Okay, let's move on to a little bit of pronunciation before we finish. I've noticed again recently that there are a few people that are having problems with their H's. Hello, how are you? Hello, how are you? Don't say hello, okay? Don't do that on the H. Make it softer. There are a few people at the meeting point I've noticed have a very strong H. So, hello. Hello, how are you? It's much softer. And combined with that, I've heard somebody talking about her hair. Now, when we have a word like her, H-E-R, notice, I've told you this before, but you probably won't hear the R on the end. Her. There are two sounds. There's the H and the It's not H-E-R, and it's certainly not H-R. Her. It's her. Her hair. Her hair. Not her. Don't do that. So the R has been problematic this week as well, not just the H. So remember, not remember. Remember. The R at the beginning of remember is very soft. Remember. You put your teeth on your bottom lip and go, "Rrr." Remember. You hear the one at the end isn't there. It disappears. So remember to be careful with your H's at the beginning of words and the letter R. It's either very soft or non-existent. And that's about all we have for this week. Just a short program this week. Before we go, I just say thank you to all the people that came to the Friday special last night to discuss the short story Desiree's Baby. Very interesting discussion we had, and look forward to the next one. And so next week we will be discussing the topic of speed. So I hope to see you all in class this week, and if I don't, have a good week. Till next week.